People say old age is when you grow weak, easy to fool, easy to push aside, but I'm Evelyn Blackwood, 70 years old, a widow, and the woman who built an empire from nothing. I didn't survive to this age just to die from a cheap glass of champagne. That night at my own retirement party, I realized my son and daughter-in-law had prepared for me a crystal coffin. Only one problem: they forgot I have never been a victim in anyone's story. Before I tell you how a single drop of poison turned into a family curse, hit subscribe and come along with me. And don't forget to comment where you're listening from, because sometimes the confessions in the comments are the darkest chapter of all. And now, let me take you back to that night. The house blazed with candlelight, laughter echoed, and crystal glasses clinked like eerie bells. People called it a retirement celebration. I, from the very first moment, knew it was a banquet of shadows. People called it a retirement party. I called it a banquet of shadows. When the crystal glasses clinked, I didn't hear congratulations. I heard chains tightening around my neck. I'm Evelyn Blackwood, 70, a widow, a survivor of battles that have felled plenty of men. I built a consulting firm from nothing after my husband died and turned it into an empire worth tens of millions. The world sees me as a symbol of grit. When I look in the mirror, I see an old woman with silver hair, whose eyes are still bright as steel. That night my house blazed like a crystal palace. Candlelight shimmered, laughter rippled. The scent of wine mingled with hydrangeas. My son, Adrian, insisted on throwing the party. "You deserve to be celebrated," he said with those honest brown eyes I'd loved since he was a boy. He handed everything over to his wife, Vanessa. Vanessa. Even saying her name leaves a chill on my tongue. Usually she's too busy to lift a finger at home, but that night she became someone else, arranging flowers, polishing glassware, setting the table like she'd been born to host. Guests whispered compliments. I sat quiet and watched. They say eyes don't lie. I looked into Vanessa's and saw no happiness in them. They were sharp, cold, dangerous, two blades hidden beneath velvet. In that moment, I knew something was wrong. Not with the flowers, not with the food, wrong in the way Vanessa moved. Every step measured the distance between my life and my death. Then I saw what froze my blood. At the champagne station in the corner, Vanessa slipped a small glass vial from her purse. She glanced around, opened it, and dripped a clear liquid into a flute. Not just any flute, the one with a tiny chip on the rim, the glass I always use at every party, a habit only family would notice. Time stalled. I watched her hand, nails lacquered red, glittering, tremble as she set the glass back exactly where it belonged. If I didn't know a predator's stare, I might have believed it was nothing. But I've lived long enough to recognize the moment a trap is laid. Someone else might have screamed, unmasked her, called the police on the spot. I've done business with people far craftier than Vanessa. Catch a snake before it strikes and you only give it room to slither away. The surest way to bring one down is to let it believe it's already sunk its fangs. I turned back with a gentle smile and kept chatting with an old client, as if nothing were amiss. My ears stayed pricked. My eyes tracked Vanessa as she picked up that very glass and walked toward me. "Evelyn, you look a bit tired," she said, voice sweet as honey. "You should have some champagne. Let me pour for you." I took the flute from her hand and met her gaze. Instead of trembling, I smiled, as if this were just another drink at just another party. Inside me, another laugh rang out, the laugh of someone who's seen the game and decided to play it to the end. Around us, conversation buzzed, music lilted, lights glittered. No one knew I was holding a carefully mixed death in my hand. And in that instant, I didn't feel like a 70-year-old woman at a party. I was the one holding the script of the whole play, the one rewriting the story they thought was already set. I raised the glass, tipped it gently, watched the champagne bubbles rise like tiny souls trying to escape the surface. I thought, if tonight they want to gamble with fate, I'll be the one to roll the dice. And I smiled, but I did not drink. Some curses don't need to be spoken aloud. They only need a sip of wine. I kept the flute in my hand, champagne bubbles glinting under the crystal lights. People around me laughed and toasted, never guessing that what lay in my palm wasn't celebration, but death fermented like sour yeast. I let Vanessa turn away to show off her new diamond bracelet, her red mouth curving as if she'd just won a match. Meanwhile, I shifted slightly and calmly set the glass beside the handbag of Linda, Vanessa's mother. Linda had the gentle, slightly misplaced air of someone out of place in a noisy crowd. She was used to leaning on her daughter, used to walking behind, never the center of any story. When I placed the glass by her chair, she suspected nothing, just glanced around for something to hold. Her trembling hand closed around that flute and lifted it like a parched pilgrim finding water in the desert. I watched it all and said nothing. Instead, I smiled and took a sip from a different glass, clean wine with no curse dissolved inside. A few minutes later, I heard a sound. At first, the scrape of a chair on the floor. Then the whole room seemed to freeze. Linda stood in the middle of the hall, eyes wide, lips quivering, white froth spooling from her mouth like sea mist. The music cut off, glass shattered somewhere, and in that instant, the party's glittering light became a wall of mirrors, reflecting the horror as it unfolded. Linda crumpled, body jerking, her dark velvet dress blotched by the lights as if the darkness itself were swallowing her. Guests screamed, some fumbled for phones, others tried clumsy CPR. And then came the sharpest sound of all, Vanessa's wail. "Oh my God, Mom, someone help!" Her voice tore the air, shaky, strangled. Tears streamed, mascara smeared. She lunged for Linda, hands shaking, calling for doctors, nurses, anyone who could save the moment. To an onlooker, Vanessa would look like the devoted daughter, an angel undone by fear for her mother. But I stood a few steps away, and I knew. I know the difference between true panic and a performance rehearsed over a lifetime. I've seen plenty of frauds in boardrooms, men who could grin while their companies collapsed, then weep like children to squeeze out one more contract. Vanessa was no different. Her trembling was calibrated to move hearts. Her tears fell in perfect tracks. What I watched wasn't the tears, but her eyes when they flicked, just once, toward me. Fear flashed there, then vanished beneath the wailing. She knew. She knew the glass hadn't reached my lips. And in the instant Linda went down, Vanessa revealed the truth. The plan had failed. Panic rippled through the guests. Someone dialed 911. The distant siren rose. I stepped forward, knelt by Linda, and took her hand. Her eyes were blurring. Her breath grew heavy, and I thought, poor woman, nothing but a pawn sacrificed in her own daughter's game. I looked up and saw Adrian forcing his way through the crowd, face pale, but his eyes slid to his wife. That glance lasted just long enough for me to know my son was not entirely innocent. A few guests helped ease Linda toward the door and onto the arriving medic's gurney. Vanessa kept shrieking, clutching her head, pounding her chest, even swaying as if to faint. It was a bravura performance. If I hadn't seen those drops fall into the flute, I might have believed it too. But I had seen, and once you've seen, you can't pretend you haven't. I stepped back to the window, holding my untouched wine. The room was chaos, fear and pity colliding, while I stood silent, watching like an old witch who has already counted every possible outcome. In the crystal mirror on the wall, I caught my reflection, a silver-haired woman with eyes brighter than ever. I thought of Vanessa, of Adrian, of betrayal surfacing like monsters that only show themselves after dark. They thought I was prey. Tonight the prey changed places. What they didn't know was that the only thing that truly drank poison that night wasn't Linda. It was their conscience. Is there any pain more bitter than watching your own flesh and blood turn into a stranger? When outsiders betray us, we can make sense of it. But when the child you once cradled to your chest, lulled with winter night songs, turns to look at you like a juicy mark, that is a pain no knife can reach. St. Mary's Hospital blazed with fluorescent light, its long corridors as cold as a stone maze. I sat on the row of waiting chairs, watching hurried footsteps pass, the thud of shoes on tile like a funeral drum. Linda lay in the ER, her breath straddling the line between life and death. Vanessa pretended to faint a couple of times, each one drawing a nurse. I sat still, hands on my knees, not trembling at all, because I knew tonight was not the night I died. Adrian arrived, face bloodless. Those brown eyes that used to warm me looked different now. I've known how to read my son's eyes since he could walk, when he used to sneak candy into his pocket. One glance at that bright, guilty sparkle, and I knew. Now the brightness was gone. In Adrian's eyes I saw ashes. A greedy fire had burned away the boy I raised. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice was gentle, a little shaky, as if he were truly worried. But when I looked deeper, I saw the evasion. His gaze wouldn't stay on me. It flicked and slid away like a thief who can't meet the homeowner's eyes. "Better than you think," I answered, and let the silence fall between us. He exhaled and sat beside me, his hand squeezing mine. "Mom, I've been thinking. You live alone in that big house, and there isn't always someone around. What if something happened to you? Like tonight?" I was really scared. I nodded, feigning contemplation. Inside, I smiled thinly. My child was using the very accident his wife caused to persuade me to hand them my life. "There are places," he went on, voice even, pouring honey into my ear, "with staff to care for you, doctors on duty 24/7, friends your age. You'd never have to be afraid of being alone. A high-end retirement community like Sunset Manor." I looked into it. "It's wonderful. I listened to each word the way you listen to a slow knife." Adrian didn't realize his soft tone hurt me more than if he'd just demanded money, because inside every word I heard love disguised as a lie. I remembered him as a little boy, toddling through the garden, shoving a fistful of dandelions into a chipped vase and beaming, "Mom, flowers for you." Where did that boy go? Or did he die long ago, buried under a mountain of debt and the greed of the woman he chose to marry? I smiled lightly. "It sounds reasonable. But you know, my castle is that house. Your father built it. Every brick has his fingerprints on it. I won't give it up so easily." Adrian's eyes darkened for a beat, then the gentleness returned. He'd practiced better than I thought. "Mom, I just want you safe. You're getting older, and the world is harsh. Older." The word dropped into my ear like 2 stones into a well. I am old, but I am not weak. I am old, but my mind is sharper than the blade Vanessa hides behind her smile. They think age is shackles. I know it's armor. I looked at my son for a long time, until he broke eye contact and stared down the corridor where a nurse pushed a gurney past. And I knew I had lost him, not to death, but to the sale of his own soul. Softly I said, "Adrian, do you remember who taught you to sign your name the first time? Who held your hand and traced each letter? Who showed you the difference between right and left?" He nodded without meeting my eyes. "Of course I remember, Mom." "Good. Then you also know." I paused, my voice measured. I have never signed anything without reading every line, and if anyone tries to bury me alive with paperwork, that person will bleed first. Adrian went rigid. I saw his hands clench and release. In his eyes, the ashes flared again, an ember kicked by wind. I turned away, saying nothing more. The hospital corridor was cold, but I felt hot, not with fear, but with a slow, banked anger. My son wants to lock me in a castle of chains, to bury me with documents for convenience. But he forgets. Once upon a time, I wrote contracts in blood. Wolves like to wear sheep's wool. I've learned to count their teeth in the dark. After leaving the hospital, I sat alone in the kitchen. The clock read 2 a.m. The house lay silent, a castle in winter. I didn't sleep. I set a thick notebook in front of me, uncapped my pen, and began writing down the numbers, the tracks Adrian and Vanessa have left over the years. I didn't need bank portals or files. I remember everything. The memory of a woman who's managed millions doesn't fog over like mist. Their house in Westfield, white stone facade, columns tall as a temple. They show it off like a fairy tale castle. But I know what it's built from. Bricks of debt. First mortgage, second mortgage, and a home equity line drawn like blood from an artery. I wrote, mortgage 1, mortgage 2, home equity loan. Each line another wolf's tooth lengthening. Next, the cars. A BMW for Adrian, a Mercedes for Vanessa. I remember the day they took me test driving, beaming. "Mom, we want to drive something worthy of our status." What status? The status of people living on borrowed money? I wrote, BMW, balance due, Mercedes, balance due. 2 gleaming metal corpses, shiny shells with nothing inside. Then the credit cards. I'd seen the red envelopes on their table, the block letters, past due. I asked, they laughed it off. Just a little system glitch. The only broken system was their ethics. I added, credit cards, $80,000 owed. Wolf fangs sunk deep in their throats, siphoning the last drops of blood. Finally, my own money, $200,000. Funds I handed over with no paperwork, no strings, because I believed a mother's love outruns any contract. I called it help. Looking back, it was blood money, an advance payment on the death they were eager for me to take. I stared at the page. The list read like an indictment. I saw clearly that Adrian and Vanessa were no longer family. In my eyes, they had become 2 wolves, quietly gnawing me to the bone. They ate from the table I set, drank from the well I dug, and when they weren't full, they decided to tear apart the one who fed them. I remembered Adrian's eyes in the hospital corridor, ashy, dried out, the look of a man who sold his soul to pay his debts. I remembered Vanessa's operatic wailing over her mother's collapsed body, not grief, but a plan gone bad. I looked at the numbers, and in the dark, I saw their true faces. No human skin, no laughter, only wolf fangs and hungry eyes. Funny, isn't it? I thought I'd given them everything needed to live decently. Tuition, a home, even the freedom to fail without fear. All they learned was how to demand more. I fed them gold, and in their hearts, the gold turned poison. I flipped the page back and forth, each figure carving another cut. People think betrayal is an act. In truth, it's a process. It starts with small loans, sweet little lies, the sidelong glances. By the time you notice, the whole castle of kinship has been eaten from within, a hollow shell ready to fall. I closed the notebook. My hands didn't shake. From this minute on, there is no such thing as family between us. A mother's love isn't a chain that keeps me still while they feed. It's the strength to stand up, stare down the pack, and pick up the knife. They think I fed them gold. No, I fed them poison, and now they're about to spit it all back up. Not all witches wear pointy hats. Some wear suits and wield a pen like a wand. That morning I went to the office of Mr. Hartley, the attorney who's been with me for 20 years. His suite is on the 15th floor, a glass fortress overlooking the city. Inside, the smell of varnished wood and leather hangs thick as incense in a temple. I stepped in and he looked up, glasses flashing under the lights. "Evelyn," he said, voice steady as a struck bell, "you look ready for a war." I sat, folding my hands. Family wars are always filthier than street fights. I need a wall. Hartley gave a small smile, not joy calculation. He opened his briefcase and spread dense pages in front of me. "We'll start by redrawing the map," he said. And redraw he did, not with pencil, but with ink and seals. He built a protective grid around my assets. A new will. Adrian reduced to a trickle, enough to live, not enough to squander. Vanessa erased from the page as if she'd never existed. He prepared more papers, powers of attorney crafted as decoys, legal nets that would snare anyone trying to seize control. "If they want a piece of paper," he said, "we'll give them one, ours." I listened, feeling like I was seated before a sorcerer sketching a circle of protection around my castle. But what chilled my blood wasn't the defense plan. It was the secrets Hartley had dug up from the dirt. He set a thin file on the desk. "You should brace yourself. Vanessa purchased a life insurance policy on you 6 months ago. Face value, $500,000. She's the primary beneficiary." I went quiet. In my mind, the image returned of Vanessa, tipping a clear liquid into a champagne flute, sharp, as if it were happening again. So it hadn't been a whim. It was a long-woven plan, a net cast to catch my death and turn it into cash. "That's not all," Hartley went on, voice lower. "Adrian has been making regular payments to a psychiatrist. Richard Stein specializes in capacity evaluations for the elderly. He has a reputation for being pliable. You see the implication. I saw it all too well. My son had been paying a stranger to prepare a declaration that his mother had lost her mind. A few signatures, a few clinical phrases, and I'd be an incompetent old woman with no say over a single dollar. Then Adrian and Vanessa could sweep in as the rescuers, taking everything while keeping their hands clean. I closed my eyes. In my head I heard the scratch of pens, metal colder than any knife. My death had already been drafted, written not in blood, but in clauses, contracts, fine print, a nightmare composed in legalese. When I opened my eyes, Hartley was studying me. "Are you afraid?" he asked. I laughed. "Afraid? No, I'm angry. Angry they think I'm a decrepit queen waiting to be deposed. They forget I've signed contracts that made men twice my age kneel. I know the power of words. I know the magic of paper. Hartley nodded and jotted a few more lines. We'll do more than defend. We'll set traps. In the wall mirror, I caught my reflection. Silver hair, a face lined with years, and eyes burning like two candles in the wind. I realized the last witch in this story isn't Vanessa with her vial or Adrian with his paperwork. It's me, with a steel pen in my hand. They think I'm an old queen ripe for dethroning. They forget. The last witches always know the spell for revenge. To catch a demon, you have to learn to dance with it and smile while you do. I sat in my own living room, warm gold spilling from the chandelier onto the long wooden table. Stacks of papers lay there, lines of cold print, like claws waiting to dig into my skin. Adrian and Vanessa sat opposite me, faces tight with hope. I leaned back, hands trembling slightly. Every inch the tired old woman ready to lay down her arms. Vanessa slid the contract toward me, her voice sweet as rock candy stirred with a sedative. Mom, this is a power of attorney. Once you sign, everything gets so much easier. You won't have to worry anymore. We'll handle everything. Adrian nodded beside her, working his best sympathetic tone. That's right, Mom. We just want you to relax. At your age, you shouldn't have to manage all this alone. Let us take care of you. I looked at them, a wan smile on my lips. In their eyes, I saw excitement blaze like Halloween lanterns in the dark. Only children want candy. The two in front of me wanted the marrow of the woman who raised them. I picked up the pen, my hand shaking as if from true fatigue. I signed, stroke by slow stroke. Vanessa exhaled, eyes glittering. Under the table, Adrian squeezed her hand. They thought I'd just handed them the keys to the vault. But not every key opens a treasure room. Some keys lead straight to the trap. When I finished, Vanessa gathered the papers in a quick, practiced sweep, tucking them neatly away, eyes shining like someone who's just learned a magic trick. Adrian took my hand and said warmly, You did the right thing, Mom. From now on, you won't have to worry. I nodded, gaze lowered in a show of gratitude. Inside, I heard the echo of my own laugh, old, dry, and sharp. My dears, I have never signed a paper to bury myself alive. I signed invitations, welcoming you into the cage I built. They left my house giddy. Vanessa even turned back to kiss my cheek, leaving a sharp, chemical perfume behind. I stood in the doorway and waved, watching their shadows shrink under the streetlights. For a second I saw them as they were, two wolves trotting home with prey, not knowing it was laced. When the door shut, the house settled into quiet. I poured a glass of red wine, sat down, and sipped. They think I've gone soft. In truth, I'm dancing with devils. And in that dance, the one who throws themselves into it the hardest is usually the first to fall. I remembered Adrian's eyes, the son who once held me through a thunderstorm and swore he'd protect me forever. Now those same eyes lit up at the thought of money. Greed had burned away the boy I raised, leaving ash. I could see every stage gesture, every honeyed line. Instead of pain, I felt a cool, steady resolve. I heard Vanessa's laugh too, sharp as a glass cutter. She believes she's bound me with paperwork, that I'm snagged in a web she spun herself. But spiders who think they own the web sometimes wake to find they're the flies. I didn't sleep that night. I walked room to room, fingertips brushing old frames and keepsakes. I whispered to the house, Wait for me. I won't let this castle fall to demons. To catch a demon, you learn its steps. I danced. I smiled. But I never forget. Every dance has an ending. And this one will end quickly. Because this dance won't last. The The rope is already winding around their necks, loop by tightening loop. Every fairy tale has a moment when the bells ring, but these bells didn't ring in a church. They knocked on my front door. That morning I sat in the living room, slowly smoothing my fingers along a hot teacup. I'd been waiting for this meeting. Adrian and Vanessa were due to come finalize the paperwork. They thought my lawyer would arrive, add a few signatures, and hand them absolute power. But when the doorbell rang, it wasn't Hartley with his familiar leather briefcase. It was two uniformed officers, their eyes cold and bright as steel. "Ms. Evelyn Blackwood?" the female officer asked, crisp and firm. I nodded. They stepped in, bringing a storm's heaviness with them. Adrian and Vanessa blanched. I saw Vanessa jolt, lips trembling, her hand clenching her handbag. Adrian tried to stand tall, but his shoulders sagged like a castle about to crumble. "We're here about a poisoning," the officer said, opening a file. "Toxicology confirms that a champagne flute at your party was laced with a toxin. It isn't any kind of medication. This is a highly lethal plant extract." Silence fell over the room. I took a sip of tea as if listening to neighborhood gossip, not a report placing my life on the scale. Vanessa broke first. She burst into tears, a high, ripping wail like bats tearing through the dark. "This is insane. I would never hurt anyone, least of all my mother. You've got the wrong person." But I saw her eyes flick toward Adrian, quick as a knife's glint. I saw Adrian's hand clench, then loosen, as if he'd just dropped the most important thing he had. The female officer opened a second file. We also found a life insurance policy taken out 6 months ago. Insured Evelyn Blackwood, beneficiary Vanessa Hart. Vanessa's scream shattered into panicked sobs. She shook. "No, I was just being cautious. People do that all the time." Adrian stared at her, face white. "What did you do, Vanessa?" His voice held no anger now. Only the sound of something breaking. "Don't look at me like that," Vanessa shrieked, mascara streaking her cheeks, turning her into a smudged mannequin. You knew everything. You're the one who said we needed money. You took me to that Dr. Stein." I sat still and watched. Confessions poured out like blood from a wound. The male officer continued. "We've also traced recurring payments from Mr. Adrian Blackwood to Dr. Richard Stein, a psychiatrist specializing in capacity evaluations for the elderly. Purpose: to prepare legal groundwork to declare your mother incompetent." Adrian shut his eyes, his whole body shaking. He looked like a sandcastle hit by sudden rain, proud 1 minute, demolished the next. Vanessa lunged toward me, desperate. "Say something! Tell them you trust me! Tell them!" I met her gaze, the cornered wolf look. I spoke slowly, clearly. "I watched you pour that liquid into my glass. I switched the glasses. Your mother drank it. I don't need to embellish. The truth will burn you down." Vanessa recoiled as if I'd cast a spell, and I had. No charms, just the truth. The female officer stepped forward and drew the cuffs. "Vanessa Hart, you're under arrest for attempted murder." The click of metal around her wrists sounded like a judgment bell. Vanessa thrashed and screamed. "You'll regret this. You too, Evelyn. You think you've won? You're just a bitter old witch." I smiled from my chair, eyes bright, like someone who'd won the match before it even started. Adrian collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. "Mom, I didn't want this. I thought it would keep you safe. His words crumbled into useless air. I said nothing. I didn't need to. I only looked at him, sad and sharp at once, like a blade that's learned its edge on my own skin. They call me a wicked witch. Maybe. But at least I'm a witch who survives. Legends don't need dragons. They only need a widow who survives the wolves' gala. The news spread faster than the wind. Vanessa was hauled into court, her expensive dress replaced by a cold gray uniform. Tears were no longer a tool, just salty puddles smearing a face once carefully made up. The judge struck the gavel, his voice rolling like winter thunder. 15 years in prison. Vanessa crumpled, but this time no one comforted her. No one could believe a word she said. Adrian was different. He didn't wear prison blues, but he lost everything. The company collapsed. The house was seized. The luxury cars towed away in the night. The son I once taught to write his first letters now sat in a cheap rental, hand trembling as he signed the bankruptcy papers. He still had his freedom, but it was an empty freedom, the kind you pace inside a cage built of debt and regret. As for me, I chose to sit in my garden. The rose bushes my husband planted years ago were in full bloom, blood red, sweet as candy. I sat there, one hand on my knee, the other around a wine glass, telling the story to Elena, my 16-year-old granddaughter, eyes brighter than any candle in this house. "Grandma," she asked, voice a little shaky, "why did they do it? Why would my dad want to hurt you?" I looked into her eyes and saw the light of another generation. Greed, Elena. When you let greed take your heart, even family turns into enemies. But remember this, power isn't just money. It's the courage to stand up for yourself. Elena nodded, small hands clasped tight. I saw myself in her, not the wealth, but the grit. I went on. People think old age is decay. In truth, old age is a second season of strength, like those roses. See them? They still bloom, though the canes are gnarled, and when they bloom, they blaze brighter than the first spring. Elena was quiet, eyes shining. I knew she was learning a lesson not found in textbooks. Never bow your head, even when the wolves knock at the door. I sat there watching the rose garden under the setting sun. Every blossom was a witness, every thorn a reminder. I survived, not because I was lucky, but because I turned age into a weapon, frailty into a trap, and everything they dismissed into strength. They whisper that I'm a witch. I don't deny it. If witch means a woman who dares to live, to avenge, to protect herself, I'll gladly wear the invisible hat. Vanessa counts her days in prison, scratching marks into the wall. Adrian drifts like a shadow, carrying ashes in his eyes. And I live here, in this house, with my roses and a granddaughter who looks at me like a legend made flesh. They thought they could write my ending, but I'm the one holding the pen. And I've added another chapter, the one where the wolves kneel and the widow steps out with her head high. I lift my glass into the dusk, the red liquid gleaming like congealed blood in crystal. I whisper, not for myself alone, but for every woman who's been belittled, cornered, branded a burden. This is not a blessing. This is a curse on anyone who dares to underestimate a widow who knows how to play the end game. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.